Streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com, this is The Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
Thank you, John. Can we finally tell the truth here, okay? Can we finally admit it? The major problem facing the world today is not global warming. It may be a problem, but it is not the major problem. And it should not be our number one priority, here or anywhere else in the world. Let us be honest. Let us face reality. Let us tell the truth. The number one problem facing the entire world today is healthcare or the lack thereof. The major problem facing the world today, facing us all, is not how to lower emissions. The major problem is how do we improve healthcare around the world. This is as true in Canada as it is in the rest of the world. Sad fact is, if we in Canada had spent as much money improving our health care as we have trying to lower emissions, we would not only have the world's best health care here, we would have no lockdowns. We would have no COVID emergencies. We would be able to handle, our hospitals would be large enough, well-staffed enough, well-equipped enough to handle whatever emergency the world was able to throw at us. We wouldn't have to close schools. We wouldn't have to drive our business people into bankruptcy. If we had spent anywhere near as much money on improving our health care as we have on trying to lower emissions. I mean, and it's not just the money, although that is part of it. Money follows priorities, doesn't it? I mean, despite our aging population, and God knows our aging hospital infrastructure, particularly here in Ottawa, look, tell the truth, okay? Whenever Trudeau is in the House of Commons, I know that's seldom, but when he is, does he stand and boast about improving Canada's healthcare system? Does he set goals to improve the number of doctors per resident? Does he set goals on how many new hospital beds he's going to create? No. What does he stand there and boast about? He boasts about how we're going to lower emissions. We're going to meet our Paris Accord or this accord or that accord, all of which is bullshit. But that's even beside the point. The fact of the matter is the priority, not just the federal government, and I'll go through this a little bit about some of the other governments and some of our health officials. The priority, very clearly, is not healthcare, despite the fact that the need to improve healthcare with an aging population, et cetera, screams at us, not just in Canada, but around the world. The world screams, reality screams, we need better healthcare. We need a better system. We need to be able to handle emergencies like COVID. We don't need to shut the damn country down in order to fight it. Our hospitals should be well equipped enough to handle it. As further evidence, we've had, as you know, all kinds of new taxes in this country. As a matter of fact, on January 1st, there was a new tax called the Clean Fuel Tax that will be added to your gasoline. Come April 1st, there will be even more taxes added. What are they? Are they healthcare taxes? Are they intended to spend money providing more hospital beds, more IC units, hire more doctors, more nurses, more staff? Is that what these taxes are for? No, they're carbon taxes. Why are the carbon taxes imposed? The intent is, it's not working, but the intent is to force us to burn less fuel, to lower emissions. That's the number one priority. If you don't believe me, listen to Trudeau. When was the last time you heard Trudeau, or for that matter, anybody in the federal government ever talk about priorities to improve healthcare? Have you ever heard anybody in the federal government? I haven't, certainly not recently. No matter where you go these days, okay? The pressure is on. The pressure is on to lower emissions. But that's not the problem. And no matter where you go. I mean, have a look at what we have done here in Ottawa, just as one example, very tiny, small example. We've got a phone call coming in from California in just a moment. But I just want to go through this just for a moment, please. You know, we talk about Trudeau standing there improving, the emission standards, et cetera, or so he claims. That's the priority. And I have to be honest with you. When was the last time you heard any hospital official or any any doctor for that matter complain? Have you ever heard a doctor or a health official or a hospital official say, you know what, the priority should not be global warming? It's a problem, you may say it's a problem, but the number one problem, we've got to improve our health care. Our health care is in many ways is beginning to crumble. You, you just even the public. I mean, we reelected Trudeau, claiming that his number one priority is to lower emissions, not to improve healthcare. Look at what we've done in the city of Ottawa, just as one example. I mean, I won't even go into the billions of dollars that we lost, that Kathleen Wynne, lost on gas plant scandals and so forth. Look, why did we go to light rail? Why have we spent billions and continue to spend billions on light rail? To improve customer service? I think not. As a matter of fact, in many ways, I think customer service is handicapped. It certainly is not, but the intent was not to improve customer service. They may claim, no, the intent was to lower emissions. That this is the city of Ottawa. We're going to spend millions more than we need to buy how many electric buses? We don't even know if they'll work. The electric bus costs almost twice as much as a diesel bus. Doesn't carry any more passengers, doesn't provide better routing or anything else. So we're going to spend millions and millions more just in the city of Ottawa on one little project to buy electric bus. I want to use this as one example to show you where our priorities are. When did you ever hear Jim Watson stand up and say, you know what, instead of spending millions of dollars extra on electric buses, what we should be doing is providing better health care? Have you ever heard him or anybody, any other pilot? No. The priority is, we got to lower emissions. What's one of the things the city of Ottawa is going to do? It's going to provide even more free plug-in stations for electric cars. I mean, it's unbelievable. Even in the face of what is happening today, we're destroying the economy. We're destroying lives, shutting down. We've gone through this before again, and nobody seems to admit, well, you know what? Maybe we should prioritize health care. Let me give you an example. My daughter is an American citizen. Okay, first we're going to go to JF in California. JF, you're on here and on the air in Ottawa. What's on your mind here today?
Well, it's odd because before COVID, there was a huge lineup to go to the hospitals. Yet when COVID happened, everybody was surprised there was a lineup to begin with. What I don't understand is how come San Diego has more hospital beds than the whole province of Ontario? In the last 20 years, hospital beds have been decreasing over and over and over, yet people seem it's okay to fine people $5,000 for mismanagement. Why are people being fined for being able to live and seeing loved ones when management's been dropped? No media mentions that. And when it comes to the environment, the big silence is China makes 1/3 of the world's pollution. Does Greta mention this? Does David Suzuki mention this? What I don't understand is how come if environment is so important, why don't you put importation tax on manufacturing countries that don't do any environmental?
I don't want to get into that. All I am saying is that, look, Global warming, according to almost all the scientists, is a problem. But I do not believe, and there is plenty of evidence, it is not the number one problem that faces us today. Just look at the number of people who have died from COVID. In many cases, many of these nations didn't even have access to vaccines, for God's sake. So the number one priority, let's deal with it as it applies to Canada. Thank you for your call, Jeff. Thank you. I want to point something out here. Okay, this is very important. As I point out, it's not just the money; it's a matter of priorities. My daughter is an American citizen. She lives part of the time in Virginia. She has a health care insurance policy, bought it privately. Now, she has some health problems. So, this is not because she's some super healthy person, okay? So, she pays about $4,500 a year for full health care coverage, including dental and chiropractic, et cetera. About $4,500 a year for this private insurance. But she gets much better health care. She drives by when she's there almost every day past a very modern, up to date, uh, high efficiency hospital, which has a big neon sign out in front that says waiting time 1 minute, 2 minute, or very often it says waiting times 0. This is standard throughout the United States. Now, I don't want to, say that it's a better system. All I am saying is that for $4,500 a year, roughly, my daughter gets better health care than we get in Ontario. Okay, what do we spend in Ontario? Well, let me tell you. This year in Ontario, I don't want to bog you down with figures, but this is important. This year in Ontario, we will spend about $4,800 for every man, woman, and child for health care. Let me just repeat that, okay? This is the 2021 budget, so it's last year's budget, but it's about the same for this year. We will spend about $4,800 on health care for every man, woman, and child in Ontario. Of that, the federal government provides only about $1,500. And by the way, that's about half of what it supplies to the province of Quebec. In Quebec, the federal government pays about $3,000 per person. But that's a different issue. All I am pointing out, what I'm trying to point out here, is that for about $4,500 in this supposedly terrible American system, my daughter gets better service. There's no wait times on most days. Even during the height of COVID, there were very, very low wait times for the hospitals in Virginia. Okay, I know that California had a different problem. Well, what I am saying is that on average, my daughter pays less for much better health care than we're getting here. I just want to point that out. And I just go back to the fact as well that very clearly our priorities are not with health care. All of these new taxes, the carbon taxes, are not for health care. Do we have a special tax for healthcare? No, we have special taxes coming out of our yin yang to lower emissions. Folks, we've got to do better. Okay, we've got to understand where the priorities are here. John, let's see what sort of reaction I'm getting. Does anybody understand? I know that I'm rambling a bit here, but just what I'm just trying to point out is that at almost every level, the priority, even now, is still not on healthcare. On April the 1st, the Prime Minister of Canada will increase carbon taxes again. Not to pay for more doctors or nurses or their training, not to provide more hospital beds or more ICU units. No, he will increase carbon taxes again, raise billions more to lower emissions. John, what have we got in the way of text coming in here?
Global warming and green energy right now, if I can just interject, is the furthest thing from my mind. It is so far down my I give a shit list, I can't even tell you where it ranks. All right, here we go. Craig says it's the left-leaning, cappuccino-sucking, Birkenstock-wearing individuals who think we should walk everywhere and heat our houses with their hot air. Lisa says lockdowns are a form of control by government, and we are slowly losing our freedoms. Tina Marie says, I have a friend.
You know what? Can I just? So.
Sorry,
you know what? That's not the issue. The government is not trying to control here. That's, those theories are. It's time we get rid of that. Let us please deal with the real issue. I ask you this point blank: is your number one priority global warming?
No.
Should it be lowering emissions, or should it be at every level improving our healthcare system? That's the question. And until the public, which is you, begins to realize this, and the public should be standing up and telling Trudeau, wait a minute, hold it. We don't need carbon tax. If you want to put an extra tax on, we'll accept a tax for healthcare. But none of you are doing or saying that. And that includes our leaders, politicians, healthcare officials, doctors, everybody. Nobody is saying this except, in my case, Lowell Green. It's time that when the public realizes that this is nuts, we don't need lower emissions now, okay? We don't need tax to try and force us to drive less. What we need, if we want to have a new tax, put a tax on to improve healthcare. Go ahead, John, please.
Bob says Canadians don't realize our healthcare is substandard compared to many other countries. Lowell is right. Tom says, in my view, healthcare is by far most important.
Thank you.
All right. Tina Marie, I have a friend currently laying in a bed in a hallway at the ER. She's been there since 5 p.m. yesterday. And she adds, I like your previous comments about paying for doctors and nurses' education if they sign a contract to stay here for a minimum 15 years. I have long been saying that. Chris says, when I was a kid, you had many choices of doctors. Now it's easier to win the lottery than to actually get a GP.
Let me jump in here.
Yes, sir.
You're raising some good points here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I think we're gradually coming to realize is that even without COVID, our hospitals were overcrowded. How long have we been talking about hallway treatment? I was in the Queensway Carleton about 5 years ago. And I was in the hallway. I was in the Civic Hospital just about 2.5 months ago with a broken hip. It took them 2.5 days to find a bed for me. There were almost no. This wasn't because of COVID. This was not there. I don't know if there were any COVID cases in there at all. This was just under normal circumstances. Our hospitals are jammed. Our ICUs are under normal circumstances. And in the past 2.5, 3 years that we've had this, I can see almost nothing done to improve that. The Civic Hospital erected a kind of tent this is how desperate we are. Civic Hospital, in order to accommodate more people, erected a kind of tent in the parking lot. Folks, this is the capital of Canada. In the year of our Lord 2021, when this was built, we built a tent, or the dome as they call it, in the parking lot. Meantime, my daughter in Virginia drives by a hospital with a big neon sign, no waiting time. And by the way, it's a very well-known hospital, and more than a few Canadian politicians and wealthy Canadians go down there for a special treatment. She pays less for her health care than we pay here in Ontario. Go ahead, John, please.
I know you're not even joking about the signs. I've been to Myrtle Beach. I've been to other places as well. You drive down the road, and they do. It's like Las Vegas. Come on in. We're open. We got room for you.
That's right. The hospitals, you may notice in many of the hockey arenas, great big sign, the hospital. I mean, some of the world's most famous hospitals are in the United States. Now, the system is not perfect, but I'm going to tell you very clearly, in the case of my daughter, in her late 50s, she gets better health care service for slightly less money. Much better. Go ahead, John.
Tina Marie on Twitch says, I'm terrified that my GP of 28 years is going to retire and I will not find a replacement. Lori says, I think we all know our health care is suffering and has been for decades, but how do we as a society change it? Our government has not and will not listen to us. They do not live the same life as the general public.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on just a minute. Here's, once again, I just want to interject. Very good question. How does the public react to this? When Trudeau stands in the House and boasts about how we're going to lower emissions, we're going to impose more carbon tax, I think that people should rebel. I think this is what should be doing. People should simply start saying to their politicians and others, this is unacceptable. If you're going to impose a new tax, the desperate need here is not to lower emissions. The desperate need, particularly in Canada, is to improve health care. I mean, we're going to have lower emissions, but nobody can get into a hospital. I mean, that's where we're headed, folks. Go ahead, John.
We got a ton of comments, Lowell, but we also have a word in for Shields.
Shields, I have to. Yes, absolutely. The big Boxing Week sale ends tomorrow at Shields. So, folks, if you're in the market for an appliance, give them a call now. Check out their website. You can order right on the web, www.shields.ca. Furniture, mattresses, appliance, electronics. They specialize in appliances, but yes, they're very well in electronics as well. And don't forget, I keep forgetting to mention this, a lovely, great little butcher shop dealing with fresh, locally grown beef, pork, poultry, etc., etc. If you want a really good butcher shop, I'm going to tell you, pretty hard to beat Shields. They're good people, folks. They're Valley people. They've been there since 1947. Huge selection of appliances, huge warehouse, so that almost everything you want is in stock. They'll get it for you in 2 or 3 days in your house. Shields.ca. John, more comments, more reactions.
So Richard asked the question, what do we do? And heard your response, and he's back to say, we have. Watch when the PM is asked questions. He does not answer them.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you've got to contact, obviously, not only your MPs and your MPPs, but letters to the editor, et cetera, et cetera. I read letters to the editor in the Sun, and almost every day, I'm sorry, it's about the four same people.
Yeah.
Like, don't phone me. I understand you're good-hearted, but don't phone me and say, what do we do, if you've never written a letter to the editor or you've never written an MP. This is a democracy.
Do politicians follow those, Lowell? Do they read letters to the editor?
Absolutely. I've said this before, and I'll tell you, I know it to be a fact. If any politician ever received 100 letters or texts or phone calls on any one issue, believe me, they would pay attention. They never, in a population of 35 million people, they would never get 100 people. But as I say, it's not just to the politicians. Letters to the editor are very powerful. Phone calls to programs like this, Rob Snow, etc., or any talk show. Get your voice out there. Let the politicians, and not only but other people know, hey, you're not alone. You're not the only one who thinks that our priority should be healthcare and not emissions. But you've got to speak up. Thank you, John. Go ahead.
Kim says, why can't we make one hospital a COVID hospital and leave the other ones to run as normal?
You can do whatever you want, but the fact of the matter is that whether we have COVID or not, our hospitals are jammed. Hallway practice, we've had hallway treatment for years in this country, in this city. I mean, let's be very honest here. At the best of times, we don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough staff. We don't have enough beds. We don't have enough equipment. We don't have enough health care. That's the problem. It's not emissions. It's health care. Go ahead, John.
I discovered that firsthand about 15 years ago. I was admitted to hospital for a gallbladder issue, which I had ignored for too long, and it turned into a whole pile of problems. I would see my doctor for 30 seconds, maybe once a day. The rest of the day, it was nurses, and a good chunk of the time, I was either in a hallway or sharing a room with someone who had completely different problems than I was dealing with. People who should not be in the same rooms together and have to, figure this out.
Precisely.
It's been a mess for so long. All right, Darlene says.
Let me just jump in there.
Yes, sir.
The phrase "so long." This is true. This is not novel. This isn't news to anybody. Anybody now, if you have an emergency, I don't know what happens today with the emergency, but if you have an emergency, you're going to get, and the doctors are good. There's no question about it. But if it's not a dire emergency, I was in a room. I've told you this before. I got a broken hip. 2.5 days for them to find me a bed. This is before COVID. No, there's no COVID in the hospital, or very little. 2.5 days just to find a bed for me. Okay, broken hip.
Ridiculous.
But when I finally do get into a room, I'm there with a man who was 8 days in the dome, no sleep because they never turned the lights out, and the other occupant had waited 14 hours in emergency. So the other man at 14 hours, he's paying 47 on his taxes, an average of $4,700 a year for health care. And he waits 14 hours in emergency. My daughter pays about $4,500 and there's no wait time. So you tell me who's got the best deal here. Go ahead, John.
Mandy says there would be so many more problems solved if people spoke up instead of bitched.
Precisely. But letters to the editor is very powerful. Have a look at the Sun. I mean, I love the Sun. I think the Sun's doing a hell of a job. But the letters to the editor, I mean, it's Larry Como is there about once a week. God bless him. Good for him. And about two or three others, somebody from Greeley. But where are the rest of you? Let the editors, you know what? If the newspaper editors know that this bothers you, they may even write an editorial about it. Go ahead, John.
Yeah. Justin Trudeau, Doug Ford, they're not reading your Facebook posts. They're not seeing your comments. All right. Kevin says nobody thinks about healthcare until they need it. Dead people do not complain. Darlene says it absolutely should be a focus on healthcare and not environment. Tired of hearing about green this or green that. We need to improve our system of healthcare, and we need to improve it now. Maggie says in Canada, if you pay for additional insurance, 3% can be tax deducted. In the U.S., medical is also tax deductible off your gross income.
It's very true. But, you know, once I just want to go back again.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we've got carbon taxes, etc., no healthcare taxes. But the city of Ottawa, I mean, look at the priorities here. We've got, as I say, we spent billions on light rail. Well, maybe there's some arguments, but light rail is not giving us better customer service. The main intent of light rail, let's be honest, was to lower emissions. We thought we're doing the right thing here. We're lowering emissions. We're going to spend millions more, double what we should for buses. Will these electric buses provide better service? How? It won't. Same service, but twice the cost. Why? Lower emissions. Instead of that, I mean, you know what? If we had, instead of spending millions there, put in another 10 beds in a hospital someplace, what would do us more good? Go ahead, John.
Yep. And our individual carbon footprint is absolutely minimal.
It is. I mean,
industry is the issue.
It's sickening in this country. Go ahead.
Yeah. Andre says unicorn farts are cheap. So there's that. Chrissy says improving healthcare big time. Healthcare is one field where you can most likely always have a job and it pays well. Hence, we could treat patients better and in less time. I could go on and on. Joshua is on Facebook. He says in long-term care in many facilities, they are understaffed, yet they are barring families from coming in to be caregivers. And we have done everything we've been asked to get a vaccine, wear a mask, etc., etc. If one has dementia and suddenly wonders why we have abandoned them, that damage is much more immediate than COVID.
Well, let me just comment on that. That's an interesting comment. Look, we're good people in this province. We have done everything we are supposed to. Well, 90% of us, 95. We've been vaccinated in many cases 3 times, wore the mask, distance, we've done everything that we are supposed to. Suffered through 2 Christmases now, etc., etc., etc. We've made all of the sacrifices. Let me ask you, what sacrifices, and this may be unfair, but what sacrifices have the health experts? If some of these people are making $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year, what have you done to improve healthcare in this province? Have you lobbied the government for more money, for more beds? What have you done? What planning have you done? We're almost 3 years into this now. What plan? We're paying you $500,000, $600,000. What have you done? You always put it on us. We're the ones who've got to change. We're the one who've got to make the sacrifice. Meantime, you continue to collect your salary and pontificate and tell us that it's all our responsibility. Well, maybe it's time that you accept it. I'm talking to the officials out there, including some friends of mine. Maybe it's time you took some responsibility here. Where are your plans? What are your plans? And I ask the same of Doug Ford and the rest. What are your plans? Okay. Other than making us mask and closing our businesses down, what the hell are your plans? I'm going to tell you this. Time that we stop spending all of this money, time, and emphasis on lowering emissions. I don't give a sweet flying fox fart about emissions right now. I may tomorrow when this is over. But right now, I just want better health care. How about you, folks? Time for better health. Let me ask you this. Do we not deserve better health care? We're paying $4,700 for what my daughter gets for $45. Do we not deserve at least as good a health care as she gets? Do we not? I would think so. Thank you all, folks. Write the editor, write letters to the editor, just for the hell of it. Even if it's only, a dozen lines. To say, listen, you know what? Let's stop spending all of this money on lowering emissions and spend the money and the emphasis on healthcare, if that's important to you. Thank you. We'll be back.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.